Welcome to this final installment in this summary series on the first Cold Steel game. We'll be picking up right where we left off in Ruhr, and we'll continue onwards until the very end of this game. A true era of upheaval has descended upon Erebonia. Now, let's dive right in. We are starting back in Ruhr, just moments after an explosion went off in the factory. There's no time to waste, as there are workers who remain unaccounted for still in the building, so Class VII rushes in and draws the attention of a massive archaism away from the factory workers. Captain Claire arrives with her troops just moments after the students have dealt with the machine. Before anything else can be said, she has the RMP escort everyone out, as this factory contains highly classified information that not even Chairman Irina's daughter is authorized to see. Once the RMP has dealt with the rest of the archaisms, Captain Claire addresses the Thors students. While she's grateful for their quick thinking, she doesn't appreciate how they threw themselves right into the face of danger, in a highly classified building no less, without waiting for the RMP to arrive. But despite Claire's harsh criticisms, Reen doesn't regret what he and his classmates did. It wouldn't have been right for military students like them to idly stand by while people were in danger. Sensing the resolve behind his words, Claire lets Class VII's actions slide this time. As for who's responsible for this attack on the factory, it couldn't be any other but C from the ILF. She also muses over why there's no sign of the provincial army, which leads her to an epiphany. As if right on cue, she receives news that the iron mine has just been hit by the terrorists. The RMP heads for the mines immediately, with Reen and the others sneaking over on foot. They arrive to another tense standoff between the provincial army, which has formed a blockade around the mine's entrance, and the RMP soldiers. The provincial army commander claims that the miners have been taken hostage by the terrorists and that entering the mines could place their lives in jeopardy. It sure appears suspicious though, especially to Fee. She says the provincial army is simply too well prepared. Not to mention, the smoke pouring out of the mines doesn't seem to be from a fire at all, but rather smoke grenades. Elisa believes this must have something to do with Reinford's first factory. Considering the RMP's recent attempts to conduct a search, the timing here is much too convenient. It's as if they have something to hide and are using the situation to dispose of the evidence. Regardless, the fact remains that the miners' lives are in danger. Class 7 heads back to Ruhr to plan. Back in the city, some friends from Thors unexpectedly show up. George and Angie are here since the latter specifically wanted to address some concerns she has regarding her family. Angie has suspicions about her uncle, Heidel Ragnar, the director of Reinford's first factory. There are signs that point to his division's involvement in dumping iron onto the black market. Toa has been looking at Reinford's yearly sales figures, governmental reports of the mine's productivity, and a whole bunch of other documents, only to have found that the various records just don't add up. The official reason for the discrepancy is that the purity of the iron ore has been decreasing over the years, meaning more must be mined in order to produce the same amount of steel. But George says this simply isn't scientifically true. They've probably been able to get away with this since it's a lot easier to avoid suspicion when it's the unrefined ore and not the processed steel that is going missing. What's generally worrisome though is that the amount of steel that can be produced from this unaccounted for iron is truly a ghastly amount. Enough to produce 2,000 oxen tanks. that's where things get even more confusing. Only the second factory, which aligns with the reformist faction, has the data to build these tanks. A lot of complicated processes go into building such technology, so it's highly unlikely that any other division could figure such things out. And this brings us to Angie's reason for being here. There's just no way her family isn't involved in all of this. It's unlikely that her father nor the provincial army would listen to anything she has to say though, so Angie's taking matters into her own hands. She knows the ins and outs of the mines after working there for so many years, so she plans to bust out the miners herself. She sure is fortunate when Class 7, especially Elisa, decides to back her up. First off, Angie will gather what intel she can from her family regarding the current situation. As for Elisa, she'll ask her mother if there are any other routes into the mines aside from the main entrance. George swings by the Ruhr Institute to borrow a device that's in development by the legendary Professor Schmidt before they proceed. Then, Elisa takes charge and leads her classmates to her mother's office. She doesn't mince words with the chairman, who is responsible for the safety of the miners since they are employees of the Reinford group. Her mother must have issued a formal objection to Marquis Rogner by now, especially since she has to have noticed what the first factory has been doing for the past several years. The chairman takes responsibility for the first factory's actions, but addresses the flaws in her daughter's criticisms. If the terrorists truly aren't acting alone here, what good would it do to issue a complaint with the Marquis? The terrorists could easily set off explosions in the mine, not to mention the fact that anything that happens there will have a major impact on the production of iron and, as a result, the Reinford Group and their global partners. Chairman Irina must fulfill her responsibilities as head of this company, just as the RMP, Provincial Army, and even the terrorists have their own purposes to fulfill. With that said, what purpose do they, as mere students, have in this situation? Of course, Class 7 has no good answer. The chairman recommends they return to the academy the next morning if they understand her words. But Elisa catches her mother by surprise when she refuses to back down. The younger Reinford won't turn a blind eye to what's been happening to this company and her family any longer. All this time she's just looked away and stayed quiet while her mom wrested power from her grandfather. In fact, she's done this ever since her father died, an event that caused Irina to become obsessed with work. The way her mother has continued to expand the company just isn't right. The injustices she's witnessed via these field studies at Thors has opened her eyes to the mistakes of her inaction. This time, Elisa will make certain that her mother hears the truth, that the way she's running the Reinford group is wrong. Sharon is surprised by her lady's resolve, while Chairman Irina amusedly wonders how her daughter, with her infinite wisdom, will tell her how to run the company. Elisa admits that she still needs more experience before she can do so, but vows that she'll have her answer by the time she graduates from Thors. Finally sensing her daughter's resolve, the chairman tells Sharon to hand over the card key to the secret passage that connects Ruhr City to the mines, one that the former chairman had built in the case of an emergency. Elisa won't say thanks right now. Instead, she's just going to continue pressing ahead, this time through action and not just words. Once the students have left, Sharon acknowledges how much they've all grown at Thors. It surely wouldn't hurt the chairman to recognize their strides, though Irina simply responds that her daughter still has a way to go before she can take the mantle of the company from her. On another note, it looks like all the principal players have gathered, so Chairman Irina asks Sharon if she can take care of one more thing for her. Meanwhile, Class 7, with Angie and George in tow, takes the elevator down to the secret passageway. It turns out the device the latter has borrowed from the Ruhr Institute is an antenna that can emit directional orbal waves, which can widen the area where communications can be sent. This means they'll be able to use the call function on their Arcus units even while they are down in the mines. George will stay in contact with Toa, who's currently monitoring what's going on throughout the Empire. He'll keep them updated throughout the operation. The rest proceed down the tunnel and receive a call from George once they reach the actual mine. A sizable RMP force has been deployed to both Ruhr and Ordis, meaning something major must be going down at Group B's field study site as well. The massive archaisms appearing just outside a door are telling, since no one stations guards outside an empty room after all. The party finds quite a few miners inside, with one stating that the others were taken further into the mine. The party is unsure if they should proceed though when one of the hostages displays visible injury. That's when Crow chimes in and says he'll escort this group back to Ruhr. Despite appearances, Crow is capable enough to take care of this alone, which leaves the rest of the party free to find the other miners. Later on, they hear and feel a very ominous rumbling. Crow calls with some bad news. There was a cave-in at the secret passageway. Luckily, none of them were injured, but the tunnel is totally blocked off now. He will search for some other way back to them though. Of course, this also means the party has lost their exit route. Reen and the others have no choice but to press onwards when they receive another call, this time from George. Toa is patched through to give them an important update. Apparently, His Majesty himself has granted the RMP authority to investigate the mine. This means the incoming confusion from the fighting bound to happen between the RMP and provincial armies will provide the perfect cover for the party to safely secure the hostages. Now's their chance. Comrade V and his subordinates are the ones waiting on the other side of the final door. V puts 2 and 2 together at last and asks V if he's a survivor from the Arn Garmer Jaeger Corps. He's surprised the Sylphide has heard of them, since they were wiped out years before she had even made a name for herself. Though it turns out that Zephyr's deceased leader was the one who told her about them, and had described them as worthy opponents. V takes such a compliment from the Jaeger King himself with appreciation. But as for why he has such a grudge against the Chancellor, well, he was responsible for the complete slaughter of his entire Jaeger Corps. At that time, Osborne had just become Chancellor, so some nobles hired Arngarmer to give him a little scare. However, he saw right through their plan. Every one of the Jaegers, from the young boys who had just joined them to the women on the team, all were gunned down without any chance to surrender. V was the lone survivor who made it out of that massacre. Sure, he can see what Reen and his friends are getting at, that just because such a thing happened to him doesn't make terrorism right. But frankly, he doesn't care what's wrong or what's right. Osborne loves to feel the flames of progress, so he'll make some of his own to give him hell. With that, Vulcan pulls out his massive Gatling gun and challenges them. But surprisingly, Reen's group nearly corners the terrorists. But that's when the big man is enveloped in a menacing aura, one that only the strongest Jaegers can muster. That's when C himself shows up. The leader of the ILF deals with the party while V and the others escape. Though C puts the students through a hell of a fight, Even he's eventually cornered. However, he's still got something up his sleeve. Flash grenades buy C time to board the airship, right as the RMP and Provincial Army arrive. Claire immediately has her troops open fire on C's ship, but the provincial troops have the audacity to interfere. Amused over the petty commotion, C tells Claire to deliver a message to her boss, that the next time they strike, he will be the one in the crosshairs. The terrorists are about to get away when the airship is sniped right out of the sky by a high-powered blast. None on the ground seem to have caught where the shot came from. All they know is that there's no way anyone could have survived the wreckage laying at the bottom of the canyon. With that, Captain Claire prioritizes securing the miners and pulls out the signed document from the Emperor himself when the provincial army attempts to block them yet again. The officer turns to the students and begins demanding an explanation for their trespassing on private property, when he's in for an absolute shock. Angie steps forward and claims they're here on behalf of her personal request, before turning the tables on the commander. Furthermore, George, Crow, and Prince Olivert arrive, His Highness making it clear that he stands beside the students' actions. He then takes control of the area as a representative of the Arnor family, the true owners of this iron mine. In the aftermath of this major incident, unsavory rumors of the noble faction's involvement were spread, with Prince Olivert launching a full investigation that was backed by Chairman Irina. Late at night, in a nook on the cliffside, Sharon is seen inspecting the weapon that brought C's ship down. Claire approaches from behind and sees that it's not a Reinford model. Apparently, it's from the same workshop that the Red Constellation has made deals with as of late. Then, two archaisms unexpectedly appear, but are brought down at a frightening speed with neither woman so much as breaking a sweat. Sharon assures Claire that the chairman has nothing to do with what went down here, but as for the other party, she suspects they're just playing around, at least for the time being. With that, Chapter 6 is brought to a close. In the following weeks, Class 7 is granted an audience with the entire royal family, who recognize them for their service in bringing the terrorists down. But on the other hand, there's some bad news. Angie's father, Marquis Ragnar, was furious at his daughter's role in the mine incident and had her withdraw from the academy permanently. Before departing, she left her Orbital bike in Reen's hands. As for the Academy Festival, Elliot and Crow have narrowed down the vocalists at last, much to Eustace, Machias, and Emma's chagrin. Finally, on Prince Olivert's suggestion, Class 7 takes a brief moment of respite in the beautiful mountains of Ymir, Reen's home. During their stay, a freak blizzard manifests, and, even stranger yet, they receive a letter with vague instructions on how to bring an end to the storm. It turns out that the horrible event that Reen has had flashbacks of throughout the game occurred in these very same snow conditions 8 years prior. He finally opens up about it completely to his classmates, who all support him in return. Together they fell a beast, which brings an end to the snowstorm. However, they eventually notice that they haven't exactly been alone. Phantom Thief B has been watching them from atop the cliffs this whole time. At long last, he introduces himself as Ouroboros Enforcer 10, though he assures them that he's not here on the Society's orders today. He's merely satisfying his own personal curiosity, as he finds Class 7 truly fascinating given they've been gathered together by his rival in beauty, Prince Olivert. He looks forward to witnessing their response to the fateful moment that soon approaches, then is swept away by his typical whirlwind of petals. Before the students depart from Ymir, Rean receives the intermediate scroll entrusted to him by Yun Kafai of the 8 Leaves One Blade School. Back at Thors, all students have begun setting up for the Academy Festival. Class 7 has been hard at work practicing their performance when instructor Sarah walks in with some good news. Their request to use the old schoolhouse for rehearsals has been granted by the principal. There's only so much of their performance they can practice in the music room's cramped quarters after all. Since their costumes don't arrive until that evening, they all split up to help other classes with their preparations in the meantime. Rean helps Toa with some tasks, such as collecting permission slips from classes that haven't turned one in yet. This includes having to butt into Becky and Hugo's spat over whose stall will drive more sales. Right after Rean delivers the final document, Crow calls with some bad news. The boutique in Heimdall is still putting the finishing touches on their costumes, so they won't be able to deliver them until tomorrow. Not to worry though, Crow's got a plan. He asks if Rean could swing over to pick them up via Angie's Orbital bike. He also suggests having someone tag along since 11 costumes are a lot for one person to carry. If Rean asks a certain fair maiden to accompany him, there's a little extra bonus scene. Rean departs the shop while Emma's still inside and spots a beautiful azure-colored bird on a lamppost. It flies away right before Emma joins Rean outside, the former asking immediately where it went after hearing a description of it. Emma dashes after it when, what do you know, Misty shows up just in time to tease Rean. Before parting ways, she hopes that he'll enjoy her show tomorrow. An odd thing for her to say on closer inspection, since the next day is Friday, and Aubin time is only broadcast on Sundays. Emma returns and apologizes for running off so suddenly. Unfortunately, she had no luck tracking down the bird. Misty steps back outside once the 2 Thors students head off, the azure bird appearing again and landing on her arm. That night in the old schoolhouse, the girls finally get a look at their costumes, and are pleasantly surprised to find that the outfits are quite tasteful in design. Then the guys walk over in their all-white ensemble. With this, the dress rehearsal can begin. Elliot channels his inner Neidhart since this does involve music and all. No one will be leaving the building until they can do a perfect run-through of the entire set. Up in the rafters, Celine notes that all the conditions have been met, and wonders if this is just the calm before the storm. The next morning, we pan over Class 7's rivals and their finishing touches on their respective festival attractions. Principal Van Dyke and Instructor Beatrix look out over the lively students from the Academy rooftop. Even if tumultuous times lie ahead for the country, it looks like the young will always continue to press onwards with vigor. Having just finished her patrol, Sarah reports back to the principal before immediately snapping to attention when she realizes Instructor Beatrix is beside him. No matter how long it's been since Beatrix rescued her, she just can't get over the reverence she has for this woman who saved her life. It also turns out that the Instructor Beatrix at one point was Neidhart Superior in the military. Speaking of the Major, he has expressed his intention to return from Garrelia in time for the festival, though things haven't exactly been looking good in Crossbell. Principal Van Dyke asks the goddess and Emperor Dreichels to protect the students from harm. Then we return to the old schoolhouse where Class 7 has just finished their best run yet. Crow applauds their efforts, but they're not quite done. Now that they got the show down, it's time to add the icing on the cake. He's got another song in mind, one that the audience is sure to recognize and will undoubtedly love. This news breaks Emma, and even Elliot, their musical genius, believes Crow is more fired up about this performance than he is. Late that night, Reen lies exhausted in his room, but before he falls asleep, it's announced over the radio that Crossbell State has just issued their Declaration of Independence. Unsurprisingly, both the Erebonian and Calvardian governments have rejected this ludicrous action. The next morning marks the official first day of the festival. In regards to the major news last night, well, it's hard to take it seriously. The Crossbell Defense Force barely poses a threat. Surely the autonomous state will end up taking back its declaration. Crossbell will still be there in 2 days. Right now, they've got a festival to enjoy. Reen tries to help out Toa when he's supposed to be having fun, so she has no choice but to force a bunch of admission tickets onto him. His task is to make sure he uses all of them up by the end of the day. Since there's no arguing with her, Reen invites his classmates to various fun attractions all around campus. That night, despite easily brushing off the topic earlier, the students can't help but discuss the current affairs involving Crossbell. Just what could they be playing at by freezing all international assets? It's not like they'll be able to protect themselves against retaliation. That's when Sarah walks in with some news that lightens the mood a bit. Class 7's families can still make it to the festival tomorrow, despite the current circumstances. However, things suddenly take a turn for the strange. A lone bell begins tolling, reminding those whose field study was in Legram a few months earlier of what occurred at Lohengrin Castle. They all rush towards the old schoolhouse, spotting a strange glow surrounding it, even from a distance. Quite a few familiar faces are already there by the time Class 7 arrives. Unable to do anything to the strange barrier, Principal Van Dyke makes a difficult decision of shutting down the Academy Festival. Reen can't accept that, though. He makes an impassioned speech about how hard each Thors student has worked to make this festival a reality. Won't the principal grant him and his classmates a chance to investigate so that the festival may proceed? While Class 7's spirit is something to be admired, they'll need more than that to get past this barrier. But as if right on cue, Reen's Arcus begins glowing, with his classmates' devices following moments after. Reen hears a mysterious voice announce that the time has come. Then he makes the discovery that their Arcus units will allow them to bypass the barrier. Principal Van Dyke gives Class 7 the go-ahead to investigate the old schoolhouse, and gives them until midnight to conduct their excursion, since they'll need a good night's rest if they're to put on an excellent show tomorrow after all. With that, Reen and his classmates step through the barrier.
What they find inside is a truly bizarre sight. Adding to this is the addition of a 7th floor on the elevator console. A mysterious door surrounded by glowing gears awaits them below. Then, a voice announces the release of the 6th lock. Finally, the second trial, whatever that means, can begin. Emma's feline friend Celine joins up with them for some reason, before their bespectacled classmate addresses them with a firmness that's unlike how she usually is. She asks if they're truly prepared to enter a place where no human has ever stepped foot. But did she even need to ask? Each member of Class 7 is more than prepared to uncover this mystery among such amazing friends. Encouraged by the resolve, Emma states that it's time for Class 7 to leave their mark on the Academy. Stepping through the portal brings them to a labyrinthine realm that defies the regular laws of physics. The students also find that, In order to proceed through the dungeon, they must rely on the different weapon types each one of them specializes in. After traversing through several floors, they reach an area where an entire bridge is formed right before their very eyes from floating pieces of debris. This is the first time they've seen the higher elements so obviously in action. Further distortions lay in the depths, where at last, they reach a door that leads to a fragment of the great power. The final trial commences and transports them to a vast and completely monochrome battlefield. A terrifying creature of epic proportions manifests before them, Loa Erebonius. This otherworldly beast takes all the skills they've developed in the Arcus links they've forged to bring down. When it appears they're victorious, a blue flame surrounds them, with letters spelling Valimar appearing before Reen. Then they're engulfed in a blinding white light. The students come to in front of the original door on the 7th floor. Just what the hell happened? Emma suspects that it was actually some sort of vision, so while everything they've experienced may not have been real, they at least seem to have cleared the final trial. Ultimately, the good news is that the old schoolhouse is back to normal, so the festival can go on as planned. But that's when the door opens and reveals a large humanoid night mechanism that's beyond any kind of technology currently in Erebonia. The group gets together to check out the auditorium stage one last time before splitting up to visit with their family members. Soon, Emma and Reen are the only ones left. They speak a bit about the festivities today before Emma finally questions Reen if he's going to ask her about what happened the night before. He responds that all he wishes to do is enjoy the festival with Elise, then put on a great show with Class VII. Besides, Reen noticed how some things even caught Emma off guard last night. He only asks if she'd be willing to share what she knows. Though she admits that she can't tell her classmates everything, she promises to share what she can. The two of them part ways afterwards, with Reen meeting up with George before Elise arrives. His engineer friend is busy observing the night mechanism with Crow. The most fascinating discovery he's made is that this thing is made out of some freakishly strong material, stuff that would be raking in the dough if someone could figure out how to manufacture it. Other than that, he hasn't been able to learn much. Now, if only they had a chance to ask the original pilot. Yup, you heard that right. There's a space right in the middle of the chest area that's big enough to accommodate one person. Crow knows Angie would be psyched to try this thing out, which, speaking of Angie, it's starting to look like she really won't be making it to the festival. Even so, George and Crow still remain hopeful that she'll turn up. It's finally time to meet up with Elise, who notices right away that her brother looks tired. She asks if he'd rather rest instead of hanging out with her, but she should know Reen would never give up an opportunity to hang out with his little sister. He'd much rather spend time touring the festival with her, so the two visit all the major attractions, meeting up with Reen's friends and their families along the way. Around noon, Reen and Elise cross paths with Patrick and Celestin. Elise does remember the High Arms boy who stops at nothing to get into her good graces, but of course Reen's brotherly instincts put an end to that before Patrick can really make his move. Celestin gives Reen a hand, reminding his liege that he must be getting to the auditorium to prepare for the operetta. Speaking of the upcoming performances, Patrick expects Class VII's very best today. Victory won't taste as sweet if that weren't the case. He asks Elise if she'd like to dance at the after-party tonight, but Celestin continues to shoo him towards his destination. Elise is honestly surprised that someone from the 4 great houses is so approachable, but Reen doesn't allow her to entertain those thoughts for very long, considering he's still not on the best terms with Patrick. That's when His Highness, Prince Olivert, and Princess Alphen arrive escorted by Captain Claire and a few other RMP troops. Reen is honestly surprised to see them there, considering all that's been going on in Crossbell. But Olivert says that's exactly why it's more important than ever that he and his sister attend. Their presence, along with that of Governor Regnitz, Rufus Alberea, and Chairman Arena, should ease the tensions that have to be plaguing the citizens by this point. Oliver then steers the conversation towards Class VII's performance. He wishes Reen the best of luck and hopes that he'll enjoy performing not just for the crowds or even just his schoolmates, but for himself. Make it a performance to remember. With that, Elise joins Alphen and Oliver, then wishes her brother the best of luck as he heads off to prepare. The finale to Class I's operetta is met with raucous applause. Class 7 starts to feel nervous, but Sarah's belief in her students encourages them to give it their all. The sudden surprise arrival of Angie, and a dress no less, is just the icing on the cake. Her father allowed her to attend the festival since she agreed to meet with some prospective marriage candidates. With all their friends supporting them, Class 7 proceeds on stage with absolute confidence. The first two songs go off without a hitch. Then the students quickly realize that Crow was right about preparing that encore. The song should be very familiar to anyone who's played the Sky trilogy. It's the ending song from SC. The audience joins in during the last half of the piece, ending with Class 7 bringing down the house. The exhausted students are trying to catch their breath back in the classroom when Patrick walks in. Reen and the others let him know how fantastic the operetta really was, the compliments putting a smile on his face, before it's wiped off just as quickly. He claims it was completely unfair of them to pull out that last song. It even had him singing along. He quickly takes his leave with a flustered goodbye before he can wound his own pride any further. That's when some other familiar faces stroll in with very good news. Class 7 has won first place out of all the class exhibits. Their reaction is surprisingly lukewarm, but that's a given considering how enamored Class 7 was with all the attractions throughout the day. Instructor Sarah reminds them all that the after party is about to get started, so they head down to the academy field together just in time to catch the lighting of the bonfires. Reen gets his chance to thank Elliot and Crow for everything they've done to make this performance a success, but it's Elliot who's truly grateful, since performing together with his classmates helped him rediscover just how much music means to him. He truly believes this wouldn't have been possible if he hadn't enrolled at Thors. That's when Lieutenant General Craig's booming voice is heard across the entire field, calling his son to leap into his waiting arms. Now that it's just Reen and Crow, the latter finds the perfect opportunity to return the 50 Mira coin he borrowed all those months ago. Reen says there's no need, especially after all the help Crow has lent to him since then, but Crow's not hearing it. He's just as grateful to Reen for all those good times. He also makes it a point that he never returns the mirror he borrows, so that makes this coin extra special. Reen fires back that there's a lot of interest on that original coin, so Crow responds that he may just get that interest back. Someday. Maybe. The after-party onlookers begin pairing off to dance, which means it's time for the player to decide which lucky lady gets to dance with Reen, or which lucky guy he can get romantic with. You know, platonically. A little while later, Reen is back with Elise when Captain Claire strolls over to them. She was greatly moved by Class 7's performance and admits that things like that make her proud to be a Thors graduate. This is news to Reen since Claire has never so much as mentioned her time at the academy before. It's for a good reason though, since most students sever ties with the school once they graduate, with many former alumni going on to join different branches of Erebonia's military. People who were the best of friends one day may find themselves enemies the next. Suddenly, Captain Claire receives an urgent call. Promptly after hanging up, she begins escorting Prince Olivert, Princess Alphen, and Elise back to Heimdall, just as the other high-profile VIPs begin departing from the academy as well. Class 7 gathers together, wondering what in the world is going on, when Principal Van Dyke descends the stairs to somberly address the students. He's just received official word from the Imperial government that this evening, Garrelia Fortress came under attack. Actually, that's too light a word to even begin describing what happened. It's more accurate to say that it was completely erased from existence. In the tense days that followed, pictures of the fortress's demise made the front pages of the Imperial Chronicle. The IBC asset freeze truly started to impact the economy, and rumors of an impending invasion from the Calvard Republic only furthered the dread felt across the country. Instructor Sarah is more than a bit late to the first homeroom of the week, bringing news that all classes have been canceled today since the Chancellor will be addressing the entire nation at noon. Class 7 plans to listen to the broadcast together in their classroom, then asks Sarah if she's seen Crow or Milliam at all today. While she hasn't seen any sign of their older classmate, whose attendance is spotty at the best of times, she did spot Milliam earlier that morning. Rean decides to search for them after everyone splits up to do their own thing. He asks Toa and George about Crow, though neither have seen him since yesterday when he returned the things he borrowed from each of them. As for Milliam, Rean finds her observing the night-looking mechanism. It seems like her boss was right to keep an eye on the old schoolhouse, a piece of information that she was supposed to keep confidential. Rean asks if that was the reason she enrolled at Thors, but she responds that this was just a side task. Her primary reason is no longer relevant, though Rean doesn't press further and instead asks if she's seen Crow. She offers to help look for him, but the two don't find him anywhere around town, so they check the dorms. According to Sharon, he returned a short while ago just for a brief visit to his room, which is oddly tidy when they go to check. With still no sign of him, they have no choice but to return to the classroom and hope he shows up. They come across Patrick on the way back, and he's actually crossed paths with Crow outside the station that morning. Crow said he was heading to Heimdall to catch Osborne's speech in person, an odd statement since Rean never saw Crow as particularly interested in politics. But with that mystery solved, Rean and Milliam return to the classroom. It's quite a surprise for all of them to learn that Misty is in charge of covering the live broadcast. No one is as shocked as Emma is, though. She recognizes Misty's voice, but oddly enough appears not to have a clue about Abentime or its host. Chancellor Osborne gives a rousing speech, vowing that Erebonia will carry out justice against those who dare attack them. During the thunderous uproar that follows, the class notices Milliam trying to get in touch with someone. She's unable to get through, then blurts out that Crow earned this victory since he did manage to outwit all the Ironbloods. Her words take the entire class aback aside from Sarah, who seemed to have suspicions of her own. It turns out that the profile drawn up of the ILF leader pointed to an individual who had ties to Thors. It's no wonder Osborne had Milliam enroll. Though the intelligence division marked the investigation as complete ever since the ILF's airship was shot down in Ruhr a month ago. The other students still don't see how it's possible that Crow is C for that exact reason, and also because he was with them the entire time during the attack on Garrelia Fortress, including when C was addressing them from his airship. Sarah says a pre-recorded message could explain both instances, however. Back in Heimdall, C is seen with the same sniper rifle that was used to shoot down the airship in the mines. He pulls the trigger, the shot finding its mark perfectly. The Chancellor commends Crow Armbrust by name before collapsing to the ground. Absolute chaos erupts in the plaza when, at last, Claire locates C, though of course she's just seconds too late. A furious shot from her orbital gun cracks C's helmet, officially revealing him to be Crow Armbrust of the Jirai Special Economic Zone. Staring down the gun aimed at him, he calmly states how this reminds him of that exact moment 8 years ago when Jirai was annexed. The Chancellor always said that if you let your guard down, you lose. And it looks like he's the one who lost the game this time. Over the radio, Misty announces that a large, silver aircraft is quickly approaching Heimdall before seemingly addressing Class VII directly. As her treat for their lovely performance at the festival, she'll show them exactly what's happening. She begins an incantation that Emma immediately recognizes as belonging to the Azure Abyss. It materializes a direct view of Dreikel's Plaza in front of the students, where Vita Clotilde is seen with the familiar azure bird. Griano soars through the skies, showing an absolute behemoth of a ship, the Noble Alliance's Pantagruel, descending upon the capital. It deploys these humanoid combat armors that boast incredible defensive capabilities and heavy weaponry that easily neutralize the armored vehicles sent to stop them. Then, they speed towards the fleet of approaching tanks. The armors agilely dodge tank fire and quickly lay waste to the entire 1st Armored Division. Claire watches in disbelief and asks what the hell those things are. Crow confirms that these combat armors, called Panzer Soldats, are courtesy of Reinford's 5th Development Division. Zephyr should be able to take the capital on their own, so he leaps off the building and flies away in an Azure Knight. Those two men who are accompanying Duke Cayenne back in Legram are seen atop the Panzer Soldats, basking in the wreckage of the now overtaken Heimdall. Then, at last, Brianos returns to the Azure Abyss Vita Clotilde. The Phantom Thief Bee himself applauds her, the second Anguis of Ouroboros, for her beautiful performance. Now with this, the preparations for the next step of the Phantasmal Blaze plan are complete.
Class 7 is, understandably, in disbelief over what they just saw, but Emma assures them that it was no dream. The Witch of the Abyss, who's something like a sister to her, is capable of projecting scenes across great distances. As for Fee, she doesn't know what to think after seeing her former family in the aftermath in Heimdall. All this time, she had no idea what happened to them. Toa and Principal Van Dyke make an announcement asking everyone to remain calm in spite of that strange vision they all just witnessed. They are working on confirming just what exactly happened in the capital. Apparently, Vita made sure only those present at Thors were shown those projections. Suddenly, Sarah receives an urgent call from Neidhart, immediately rushing over to meet him at the front gate. Gaius notices something outside and opens the window. That's when both he and Fee pick up on the sound of armored cars, and even those armored soldiers, approaching from the west. It looks like they're planning to take over the academy. Seeing how quickly those Panzersoldats dealt with those tanks, the students agree that their instructors will need all the help they can get. Class 7 cross paths with Patrick and Ferris on their way out and tells them both to stay here. They are entrusting the protection of the building to them and the other students. The citizens of Trista are evacuating to the academy as they speak, with Toa and George shutting the front gates just moments before Class 7 can reach them. The upperclassmen try to talk them out of it, but Reen and the others won't just sit around and allow the noble faction to take their precious academy. Toa finally gives them permission to help the instructors, but reminds them that there's no shame in running or surrendering if their lives are in danger. She begs them to do anything but die out there. Reen and the others follow the sounds of warfare and arrive to find the instructors holding their own against the noble faction's assault on the west exit. The ease in which they handle the armored cars leave the students speechless, though reinforcements quickly arrive in the form of Panzersoldats. That's when Sharon promises to give Sarah and her colleagues the assistance they need to seize victory. Sarah sees that the maid has picked up a few tricks since she's last seen her in action 2 years prior. Sharon is Ouroboros Enforcer 9 in actuality, though she claims she's currently on leave from that role. Right now, she is but a humble servant of the Reinford family and will protect her Lady Elisa at any cost. Neidhart and Principal Van Dyke get in on the action, giving these forces quite the handful at Trista's west exit. Class 7 is drawn out of their shock over Sharon's reveal when they hear something approaching from the east. Using Lammy, Millium confirms that Panzersoldats are headed this way in a pincer attack. The students rush out to meet the opposing force of S and her terrorist colleague. It just wouldn't be fair if both soldats attacked at the same time, so Scarlet lets her colleague handle the students first. But of course, because Class 7 is Class 7, the first soldat is brought to its knees. The teens aren't so lucky against Scarlet's Spiegel model though. Its reactive armor nullifies all their attacks, and her special move wipes them all out with a single blow. Reen gets to his feet and begins to activate his special power. He can tell that going all out here will likely cost him his life. But that's when that same mysterious voice addresses him. If he desires power, he only needs to call its name. That's when Reen hears Celine speak for the first time. She reminds him that he already knows the name he seeks. Reen calls forth the name Valimar, which miraculously activates the knight down in the old schoolhouse. It takes the elevator up, then speeds towards the students. What they see before them is one of the divine knights, an incarnation of the great power. This one is called the Ashen Knight, Valimar. Scarlet, on the other hand, is furious since C told her it shouldn't have been able to move yet. Reen instinctually enters the cockpit and evades her incoming attack with ease. Then he adopts the Eight Leaves unarmed form to swiftly disarm Scarlet herself. His victory is quickly cut short, though, via a very familiar voice cutting in. Crow's Azure Knight lands right in front of Class VII and turns as the pilot reflects on how the night before seems like a lifetime ago now. He admits that the whole school thing was fun while it lasted, but at the end of the day, he's C. The crow armbrust they all knew is not real. But Reen adamantly refuses to believe that. He refuses to believe all the good times they shared meant nothing to him. But Crow's response just cuts deeper. He throws Scarlet's sword to Reen, saying he can't have this Ashen Knight ruining things later down the line. Crow takes no joy in doing this, but he has to make sure the Academy is taken out of commission. So, Reen asks what he gets if he's the victor. Crow agrees to pay up the interest on that 50 Mira coin if that's the outcome. Then both Divine Knights are enveloped in an incredible amount of mana stemming from their respective wills, and begin their duel. Just when it appears that Reen has won, Crow reveals he was just feigning defeat. He has been piloting his Divine Knight for 3 years now, after all. One blow from Crow's powered-up form severely damages Valimar. Bad news, since a Divine Knight's pain is shared with its pilot. But Class VII steps in before Crow can finish Reen off. Whoever the player chose as Reen's partner during the festival after-party will have the last word before Valimar uses the remainder of his power to retreat, Reen screaming to let him stay. And cue the end credits to the first Cold Steel game. I want to give a big thanks to the homie, Pharaoh Fiasco, for lending his narration here. He's a great Let's Player who's currently going through Cold Steel 3 blind. Links to his YouTube channel in the description. Please like this video if you liked it, and subscribe for more Trails content, and follow me on Twitter and support me on Patreon if you're so inclined. But until next time guys, take care. See ya!